It was supposed to be a quiet funeral, but in our family, nothing ever stayed quiet for long. The rain had just stopped in Maple Hollow, our sleepy Vermont town. The air still smelled of wet pine and lilies from the church altar. I stood at the edge of the grave holding my mother's rosary, the beads cold against my palm. My brother James whispered behind me, "The lawyer's coming this afternoon. We'll settle everything today." Everything. Meaning Mother's house, her land, and the bank account none of us were supposed to know about. I said nothing. My throat burned from holding in words that had been building for years. My mother, Margaret Parker, was the kind of woman who could silence a room with one look. Even in her coffin, she looked in control, her lips pressed together as if she had taken her secrets with her. When the priest said his final prayer, I noticed Martha, my younger sister, checking her watch. "Can we skip the cemetery?" she muttered. "It's freezing. I just want this over with." I turned to her, voice shaking. "She's our mother, Martha." "She was our mother." She shot back, sliding on her sunglasses. The word was hit me harder than I expected. As the coffin was lowered, a gust of wind knocked over a vase of white roses. The petals scattered across the muddy ground, and that's when I saw something strange, a small silver key tangled in the bouquet. I picked it up instinctively. It was old ornate with tiny letters engraved A37. "Hey, what's that?" James asked, his tone suddenly sharp. "Nothing," I lied, slipping it into my coat pocket. He narrowed his eyes, but before he could say another word, the hearse driver called us back. "Family, please step away." I watched the last shovel of dirt cover her casket. The sound echoed final hollow. My chest tightened. For 68 years, I'd lived under her shadow, and now somehow I felt she was still watching me. Back at the house, relatives filled the living room, sipping coffee and whispering about who gets what. I wandered into her bedroom, the one nobody dared enter while she was alive. The curtains were drawn dusk, dancing in the pale afternoon light. Her scent, lavender and old cedar, still lingered. Then I saw it, the wardrobe. The same one she locked every night as if guarding something sacred. The same wardrobe with a small brass lock. I took the key from my pocket. My hand trembled as it fit perfectly into the keyhole. A soft click. Inside, the faint smell of mothballs and something else, paper old and damp. A folded envelope lay on top of her shawl, marked in fading ink for Helen. "Open only when I'm gone." My breath caught. My name. I hesitated, heart pounding. What could my mother possibly hide from me, from all of us? And more importantly, why did she want me to be the one to find it? What would you do if your mother left you a letter like that and you weren't sure you wanted to read it? I held the envelope like it might burn through my skin. The paper was yellowed soft at the corners, sealed with a piece of wax that had cracked long ago. For a moment, I just stood there in the quiet of her bedroom, the ticking clock, the faint hum of voices downstairs, the sound of rain dripping off the gutter. Then I broke the seal. The handwriting was hers, sharp, elegant, and trembling at the end of every stroke. "My dearest Helen, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I've carried a truth that has haunted me all my life." My eyes blurred as I read. Each word felt heavier than the last, but before I could reach the second page, a sudden knock on the door jolted me. "Helen." It was James. "The lawyer's here and everyone's waiting." I stuffed the letter back into the envelope and slipped it into my coat pocket. "Coming," I called, trying to keep my voice steady. Downstairs, the smell of coffee had turned bitter. The lawyer, a short, balding man named Mr. Grafton, sat at the dining table surrounded by my family like a pack of wolves. He cleared his throat. "Mrs. Parker's last will is brief." James leaned back, smirking. Martha crossed her arms. "Her property at Maple Hollow Lane." "Mr. Grafton," continued, "goes to Mr. James Parker." James grinned. "As expected. The farmland," he went on, "to Mrs. Martha Green." Martha gave a smug little nod. And finally, the lawyer said, glancing at me, to Miss Helen Parker, "Her personal belongings, photographs, books, and one cedar box." Laughter broke out before I could even breathe. "Figures," Martha snorted. "The sentimental junk." "Yeah," James added, "you always liked the old stories more than real life." Their words stung, but I said nothing. I was used to it being the quiet one, the one who stayed home to care for Mom while they chased money. Still, that letter pulsed in my pocket like a heartbeat, a truth that has haunted me all my life. When everyone left the room to toast their inheritance with cheap champagne, I slipped away again, back to the bedroom, back to the wardrobe. This time I pulled out the cedar box the lawyer mentioned. It was heavy bound with 2 small latches. Inside were black and white photographs, Mom as a young woman standing beside a man I didn't recognize. He looked nothing like my father, and tucked beneath the photos another envelope, smaller, thinner, marked simply A37, the same engraving as on the key. My pulse quickened. The paper inside was older, almost brittle, but the moment I unfolded it, I froze. It wasn't a letter this time, it was a birth certificate. Name James Parker. Father unknown. I gasped so loudly it echoed off the walls. From downstairs I heard footsteps, heavy, quick, climbing the stairs. Helen James's voice again. I stuffed everything back into the box and pushed it deep behind the clothes just as the door burst open. He stared at me suspicious. "What are you doing in here?" "Just saying goodbye," I managed. He didn't buy it. His eyes swept the room, lingering on the wardrobe. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that hides a warning. "Careful what you dig up, Helen," he said softly. "Some things are better left buried." But as his footsteps faded, I turned back to the wardrobe, my heart pounding, because I already knew whatever Mom hid in that letter was about to destroy us all. Before the funeral, before the key, before that cursed letter, my life was painfully ordinary. I was Helen Parker, 68 years old, retired English teacher from Burlington High. My days used to start with black coffee in a chipped mug and the local newspaper folded perfectly in half. I'd circle grammar mistakes out of habit, once a teacher, always a teacher. I lived alone in a little blue house at the edge of town, surrounded by birch trees and memories that refused to fade. My husband Robert had passed 12 years ago. My son Evan worked in Chicago. We spoke maybe once a month, if that. People thought I was content, the quiet spinster sister, always polite, never demanding. But quiet doesn't mean content. Sometimes it means forgotten. James and Martha lived just 20 minutes away, yet I only saw them during holidays or when Mother called. To them, I was just Helen, the teacher, the one who never married, rich, never made money, never mattered. I still remember one Thanksgiving years ago. Martha arrived in her brand new Lexus James in his tailored coat. I'd spent hours roasting the turkey and setting the table. But when they walked in, they looked around as if my home was a charity project. James laughed. "Still got that old couch, huh?" Martha poured herself wine before even saying hello. And Mother, sitting at the head of the table, just sighed. "You could have done more with your life, Helen. You're too soft." That word stuck with me for decades. Soft. It meant kind. It meant weak. It meant disposable. So I became quieter, shrinking inside my own skin until even my reflection felt smaller. But when Mother got sick 2 years ago, who took care of her? Not James, who had business trips. Not Martha, who said she couldn't stand hospitals. It was me bathing her, feeding her soup, sleeping on the floor beside her bed. And in those long, sleepless nights, she'd say things that made no sense. "Don't let them find the letter, Helen. Promise me you'll forgive me when you know." I thought it was the morphine talking. Now I'm not so sure. Even at the end, she kept her secrets. When she passed, she looked almost peaceful, as if relieved. But I wasn't relieved. I was angry. Angry that I gave her my life and still never knew the full truth. Sometimes I'd sit on my porch at dusk listening to the cicadas hum, wondering how a family could live under one roof for 60 years and still not really know each other. Now, after finding that letter, I realize maybe she wanted it that way. Maybe the silence was never weakness. Maybe it was protection. And if that's true, then everything I thought I knew about my family is about to unravel. The reading of the will felt less like a family gathering and more like a courtroom brawl. Mother hadn't been gone 2 days, and already James was pacing the parlor like a CEO waiting for his bonus. The air inside her house was heavy, stale perfume, burnt coffee, and tension thick enough to chew. The lawyer, Mr. Grafton, sat at the oak table with a stack of folders. His glasses kept sliding down his nose, and his voice trembled like he wanted to be anywhere else. According to Mrs. Parker's instructions, he began the property at Maple Hollow Lane, will transfer to Mr. James Parker. James smiled wide like a wolf tasting victory. Of course. I maintained that place for years, he said, though everyone knew he hadn't lifted a finger since college. Martha leaned forward, eyes gleaming, and the farmland Mr. Grafton flipped another page. To Mrs. Martha Green. Martha's red lips curled into satisfaction. Well, that's fair. I always said I'd make something useful out of that land. Then he hesitated, the pause that made everyone glance at me. And to Miss Helen Parker, he coughed. Her personal effects, photographs and a cedar keepsake box. Silence. Then James burst out laughing. You're kidding, right? The teacher gets the trinkets, Martha joined in. Well, at least you won't have to worry about property taxes. Their laughter echoed off the walls, sharp and cruel. I sat there staring at my hands. My fingers trembled, not from anger, from humiliation. For all the years I spent caring for Mother, this was her reward, a few dusty memories. But deep down, something shifted. A quiet, cold realization she meant for this to happen. Mr. Grafton cleared his throat again. There is one final note in her handwriting. He pulled out a small card. It reads, Helen will know what to do. James frowned. What does that even mean? I met his eyes. Maybe it means she trusted me. He scoffed. Don't flatter yourself. I rose from the table before the tears could betray me. I don't need your money, I said quietly. I just hope one day you remember what respect feels like. James laughed. Respect doesn't pay bills. No, I replied, but it keeps you human. I left them arguing in the parlor, their voices fading behind me like static. In the hallway, the portraits of our parents lined the wall, smiling, unaware of what their children would become. I stopped before Mother's photo, her eyes as sharp as ever. You knew this would happen, didn't you? I whispered. Somewhere deep in my pocket, the folded letter seemed to pulse. Helen will know what to do. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt chosen, and that terrified me. Because if Mother trusted me to know what to do, it meant she'd left something behind, something she couldn't trust anyone else to find. That night, the house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, 12 sharp clicks for every second I didn't sleep. The laughter from earlier still echoed in my head, James's smug grin, Martha's wine-stained smile. They got everything. I got a box. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was unsettled. The cedar box sat on my nightstand, its wood faintly smelling of Mother's perfume, lavender, and old paper. I traced the carvings on its lid with my finger, thinking about that line, Helen will know what to do. What did she mean? I opened the box again. Inside the same old photos, the birth certificate and the smaller envelope marked A37. I took out the silver key and turned it under the lamp. Its metal gleamed like it had been polished recently. Someone must have handled it, maybe even after she died. A chill ran through me. I decided to walk down the hallway to her old bedroom. The floor creaked under my slippers, each step heavier than the last. Her door was half open, the same way she left it the night before she passed. The moonlight spilled through the curtains, revealing the wardrobe again, tall, dark, and still. I placed the key back into my pocket, the same key that had unlocked the letter, the same one engraved A37. But why was the second envelope marked the same? I pulled it out, hesitating. My hand shook as I unfolded the paper. It wasn't another letter, it was a banknote, a safe deposit box at the First Maple Bank, registered under my mother's maiden name. The date on it was March 12th, 1974, the year I was born. A cold wave went through me. I whispered to the empty room, Mother, what did you do? Before I could think further, footsteps echoed from downstairs, slow, deliberate. At this hour, only one person could be in the house, James. The sound moved closer. Creak, creak. Each step louder than my heartbeat. I quickly blew out the lamp and hid behind the door. He entered, flashlight in hand, whispering to himself, She must have hidden it here somewhere. I held my breath. He opened drawers, checked the dresser, then paused at the wardrobe. His fingers brushed the handle, then he stopped. For a second, I thought he saw me. But he just muttered, It doesn't matter. The lawyer will tell me everything tomorrow. Then he turned and left, shutting the door behind him. I waited until his footsteps disappeared. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling around the letter and the key. Whatever Mother left, it wasn't just about inheritance. It was something James was terrified I'd find first. I looked toward the wardrobe once more, moonlight glinting off the brass handle. If A37 wasn't just a key, maybe it was a message. And I wasn't sure I was ready for what it would unlock next. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the storm inside me hadn't. I sat at the kitchen table with a half-finished cup of coffee, staring at the silver key glinting under the light. The number A37 caught the sun for a second, almost like it wanted my attention. I kept hearing Mother's voice in my head. Helen will know what to do. I'd spent my whole life doing what everyone told me. Teach, obey, stay quiet. Now the one person who'd controlled every part of my life was telling me to decide something, and I didn't even know what. After breakfast, I drove to Maple Hollow Bank, the oldest one in town. The same one Mother used for everything mortgage savings, even her church donations. The woman at the front desk recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Parker's daughter, right?" she said kindly. "I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I whispered, gripping the counter. "I found this." I slid the key toward her. She studied it, then nodded. "That's a safety deposit key. You'll need a co-signature or proof of ownership." I showed her the old deposit slip from the envelope. Her eyes widened slightly. "This is from 1974. That box might not even exist anymore." "Could you check?" I asked. She hesitated, then disappeared into the back room. A few minutes later, she returned holding a small clipboard. "Well, you're in luck. Box A37 was transferred to our legacy vault 20 years ago. Still active. But I'll need identification and a witness. Can the witness be my mother's lawyer? Of course." I thanked her and walked out, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was echoing in my ears. The parking lot smelled like wet asphalt and pine needles. I dialed Mr. Grafton. He answered on the third ring. "Helen, I was about to call you. Is everything all right?" "No," I said truthfully. "I need your help. It's about something Mother left a bank box from 1974. A pause. Then, "Come by my office this afternoon. And Helen, don't tell your brother yet." That last line froze me. "Why not? Just trust me," he said, and hung up. When I arrived at his office, he was already waiting with 2 cups of tea. His expression was different this time, gentler but cautious. "I've been handling your mother's affairs for 40 years, he said slowly. "She was meticulous about everything. But there was one document she never let me file, officially the deed to her house. She said she was waiting for the right time." "The right time for what?" he sighed. "That's what I could never figure out. But if this key really is from her safe box, it might hold the answer." We drove together to the bank. The manager escorted us down a long hallway lined with metal doors. Each one identical, each one whispering secrets from decades ago. When we reached A37, my hands were shaking. "Would you like to do the honors?" the manager asked. I nodded, slid the key in, and turned it. A low, metallic click echoed through the vault. Inside was a small tin box wrapped in a faded handkerchief. My mother's initials, MP, were stitched on the corner. Mr. Grafton stepped back. "Go ahead, Helen." I unwrapped it carefully. Inside were 2 things, a stack of old letters tied with ribbon. A sealed envelope marked, "For my children, when truth becomes too heavy to hide." I looked at the lawyer. He looked at me. "Should we open it?" I asked. He hesitated. "It's yours now, Helen. But know this, once you read what's inside, you can't unread it." The fluorescent light flickered above us, humming softly. My palms were slick with sweat. I broke the seal. The first line made my knees go weak. "One of you does not belong to the Parker family." My breath hitched. Mr. Grafton's eyes widened. "Helen, what is it?" I folded the letter slowly, my mind spinning. I think I whispered my mother just decided to tell the truth from her grave. Outside, thunder rumbled again, even though the sky was clear. I couldn't breathe. The words blurred before my eyes. "One of you does not belong to the Parker family." The paper trembled in my hands, yellowed and soft, smelling faintly of lavender and age. I forced myself to keep reading. James was born in the winter of 1958, the year your father left for his last business trip. He never returned. When he came back months later, he brought home a newborn and told everyone the child was ours. My lips moved without sound. Brought home a newborn. I wanted to love him as my own, but I knew. Every time I looked into his eyes, I saw another woman's face. The room tilted slightly. I felt the walls closing in. Mr. Grafton stood nearby, frozen, afraid to interrupt. I raised James as my son because I couldn't bear to destroy your father's name. I told no one, not even you, Helen. But now I fear this lie will rot our family from the inside. My mother's handwriting wavered near the end as if her hand was shaking. If you have found this letter, I beg you to forgive me. You were always the kind one, Helen. The one with a heart big enough to protect what I could not. I stopped. The words swam. The air in the vault felt thin, heavy with secrets that had slept too long. Mr. Grafton cleared his throat gently. Helen, you should sit down. I lowered myself onto the bench, clutching the letter to my chest. All these years, she let me believe we were just a normal family. He nodded solemnly. People do terrible things to protect their loved ones, but she didn't protect anyone, I whispered. She built a lie so big we lived inside it. There was more in the box, the stack of old letters. I untied the ribbon, my fingers numb. Each envelope was dated over decades. One stood out, 1974, the year on the bank slip. Inside another confession, written in the same elegant hand, I made a second mistake, Helen, a far greater one. And you deserve to know before it's too late. But before I could read further, the bank manager knocked softly. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we're closing early today. There's a storm warning. I jumped, startled, quickly folding the letters back into the box. My pulse thudded in my ears. Right, of course. As we left the vault, I felt like someone was watching me. The corridor's fluorescent lights flickered the hum of the air vent sharp and eerie. Outside, the wind had picked up again, dry leaves skittering across the parking lot. Mr. Grafton turned to me before we parted ways. Keep those letters somewhere safe. And Helen, don't tell anyone yet. Not until you're sure you can prove it. Prove it, I repeated. You think anyone will believe me? He gave a sad smile. Truth rarely needs believers. It just needs time. That night I couldn't sleep. The letter lay open on my kitchen table, the ink gleaming under the lamplight. I stared at those lines over and over. One of you does not belong. You were always the kind one. I wanted to feel vindicated. All those years James called me worthless. All those times Martha mocked my poor teacher life. But instead, I just felt hollow. Because if what the letter said was true, it meant James was never truly my brother. And it meant my father, the man I worshipped as a child, had built this entire family on betrayal. I reached for the next envelope, the one from 1974. As I started to open it, thunder cracked outside, shaking the windows. The power flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. In the darkness, I sat motionless, clutching the letter. Then, from upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Someone was in the house. James. I whispered my voice, barely a breath. No answer. Just another creak, closer this time. I grabbed my flashlight, heart hammering, and pointed it toward the hallway. For a split second, I saw a shadow move past the stairway, tall, familiar. Then silence. I backed toward the table, clutching the letters tight to my chest. Whatever truth Mother had buried James wasn't going to let me read the rest of it. And in that moment, I finally understood this wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was about survival. The next morning, the house still smelled like rain and candle wax. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that creak again, the footsteps slow and deliberate ending just outside my door. But when I'd opened it last night, the hallway was empty. The letters were now locked inside my old dresser drawer, hidden beneath a pile of sweaters. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had touched them after I fell asleep. I decided to call Mr. Grafton again. We need to talk, I told him. His voice was steady but cautious. Come by the office. Alone. His law firm sat above a bakery on Elm Street, the smell of butter and coffee seeping through the thin carpeted floors. He greeted me with a tired smile, the kind that comes from carrying too many secrets. "I've been thinking about what you told me," he began, motioning for me to sit. "Your mother. She was more complicated than most people knew." "That's one way to put it," I muttered. He leaned forward, folding his hands. "There's something I never told anyone. Years ago, when she first wrote her will, she asked me to keep two versions. One public, the one your siblings saw, and one private." My pulse quickened. "Private?" He nodded. She said, "If my children ever tear each other apart for money, give Helen the second one." But she never gave me permission to deliver it. I stared at him, trying to process it. "Do you still have it?" He opened a drawer and pulled out a thin, yellowing envelope stamped "Confidential." "I shouldn't be showing you this, but considering what you found at the bank," he slid it across the desk. The seal was broken, as if someone had once opened it and resealed it with care. Inside were 2 pages typed neatly on old paper signed Margaret Parker. The first page was almost identical to the original will until the last paragraph. If my daughter Helen is reading this, it means the truth has surfaced. The Parker estate must not go to James, as he was never legally adopted under my name. The true heir to this property and our family holdings is Helen Parker. I blinked, my breath catching. She left everything to me." "Yes," he said softly, "but she also wrote something else." He handed me the second page. "Helen must decide whether to reveal this truth. If she chooses silence, she will preserve peace. If she exposes it, she may destroy what little remains of this family." Mr. Grafton watched me in silence as I read. "She wanted me to choose between justice and family," I said, my voice cracking. "She knew this would break us." He nodded. "That's why she trusted you. You're the only one who wouldn't use it for revenge." Before I could reply, a loud bang echoed from the hallway outside. Both of us turned. The receptionist's voice followed, flustered. "Sir, you can't go in there." The office door burst open. "James!" His face was pale eyes, bloodshot. "You think you can hide things from me, Helen," he snarled. "I know about the box. The bank called. I'm still listed as next of kin." Mr. Grafton stood up, calm but firm. "Mr. Parker, you have no right to—" James slammed his fist on the desk, cutting him off. "That old woman lied to all of us. You think you're the saint here, Helen. You're just like her, keeping secrets, pretending you're better." I met his gaze. For the first time, I didn't look away. Maybe I'm just the only one willing to face the truth. His lips twisted. "You won't live long enough to tell it." Then he stormed out the door, rattling behind him. Mr. Grafton exhaled shakily. "Helen, I think it's time you protect yourself. Whatever's coming next, he won't stop." And deep down, I knew he was right. The truth had finally been unearthed, but now it was hunting me. When I left Mr. Grafton's office that afternoon, the autumn air cut cold against my skin. The sky hung low gray and swollen, ready to burst again. I gripped the steering wheel tighter than I should have, my knuckles white. My brother's words still rang in my ears. "You won't live long enough to tell it." That wasn't anger, that was a threat. I drove straight home, locking the door behind me. For the first time in years, I felt afraid in my own house. I closed the curtains, turned on every light, and set the envelope from Mr. Grafton on the kitchen table. The truth sat there, quiet, heavy, waiting to be heard. I poured myself a cup of coffee and unfolded the will, again reading every line until the ink blurred. There was no doubt James wasn't Mom's biological son, and the property by law was mine. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking, because even as part of me wanted to shout the truth to the world, another part whispered, "What if he already knows more than I do?" I walked to the bookshelf where I kept the letters from the bank vault. One still hadn't been read, the one from 1974. I pulled it out, slid a knife under the seal, and unfolded the page. "To my dearest Helen, there is one more secret, and it must never reach James. When your father returned home that winter, he was not alone. The woman he brought with him, her name was Vivian Cross. She had a baby in her arms. He begged me to raise the child as ours. I agreed, not out of love, but out of shame. That child was James. The room spun. I feared if the truth came out, your father would lose everything, his company, his reputation, his marriage. So I lied. I let the world believe James was mine. My vision blurred with tears. All my life I'd wondered why Mom looked at James with a mix of distance and duty. Now I knew. He was the living proof of betrayal, a walking wound she could never heal. But there was more. If you are reading this, Helen, I must warn you, Vivian never left. She kept in contact with James. She told him things about your father that even I didn't know. If he ever learns the truth from me, he will not forgive me or you. A car door slammed outside. My head snapped up. I ran to the window. James's black truck sat in the driveway. My heart pounded as I stuffed the letters into the kitchen drawer. Moments later, the doorbell rang, long, insistent. "Go away, James," I shouted through the door. "I just want to talk," he said, voice eerily calm. "We're family, Helen. We shouldn't fight over paper. Paper that says you're not who you think you are." I snapped before I could stop myself. Silence. Then a low, dark laugh. "So you read it." He stepped closer, pressing his hand flat against the glass pane. "You think that letter makes you better than me? It doesn't change anything. Mom may have written lies, but I'm still the one who built this family. You just cleaned up after everyone." His words cut deep, but I held my ground. "Mom didn't lie this time, James. You did your whole life." His smile vanished. He leaned in until his breath fogged the glass. "If you tell anyone, I swear you'll what I said softly. Kill me like you killed the truth." For a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes, not rage, but fear. Then he turned, storming back to his truck tires, screeching as he sped off. I stood there in the fading light, shaking. He knew everything now, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't about who inherited the house. It was about who survived the secret long enough to claim it. By the next morning, I knew I couldn't hide it anymore. The truth had been sealed for decades, and I was the last Parker still willing to face it. My hands trembled as I dialed Martha's number. "We need to talk," I said. "What now?" She groaned, half asleep. "It's about Mother. About James." The silence on the other end lasted too long. Then she sighed. "You've been acting strange ever since the funeral." "Fine. Come over, both of you. I'll call James." "No," I said quickly. "We'll meet at Mother's house. It's where this started." By afternoon, the three of us stood in the parlor, the smell of old wood polish and wilted flowers still lingering from the funeral. Rain tapped against the windows, steady as a heartbeat. Martha looked irritated, arms crossed, while James paced like a caged animal. "Let's get this over with," he snapped. "What's your big revelation, Helen? Another one of your teacher lectures?" I laid the letters on the table, the banknote, the will, and the envelope marked A37. "This," I said, voice shaking, "is what Mother left us. Not her money, not her land, the truth." James gave a mocking laugh. "Truth? You mean your fantasy?" Martha frowned. "James, maybe we should just—" I cut her off. "You were never Mom's son." The words hit the air like lightning. James froze. "What did you say?" I took a breath and opened the letter, reading aloud. James was not born to Margaret Parker, but to Vivian Cross. He was raised under the Parker name to protect the family's reputation. Martha gasped. "Helen, stop." But I kept going. My voice steadied with every word. "The rightful heir to the Parker estate is Helen Parker. This letter is my confession and my final will." When I looked up, James's face had gone white, his hands clenched into fists. "You're lying." I pushed the documents toward him. "See for yourself." He snatched them up, scanning the pages, breathing hard. Then suddenly, he hurled the letter into the fireplace. Flames caught the edge, curling the paper into black ash. "Stop!" I screamed, rushing forward, but it was too late. James turned on me, eyes wild. "You think you can erase me with words I built this family's business while you were busy grading essays? You built it on a lie," I shouted back. "And now you'll finally answer for it." Martha grabbed his arm. "James, please. She's our sister." He shook her off violently. "She's nothing to me. None of you are." For a moment, the only sound was the rain hammering against the windows. Then I said quietly, "Mom wanted peace, not war. But you've already chosen your side." Something in him cracked. He lunged forward, grabbing the box of remaining letters from the table. "I'll make sure no one ever sees these again." "Don't I?" shouted, grabbing his wrist. We struggled the box, slipping from our hands and scattering across the floor. Photos, papers, and one small metal locket spilled out, landing near the fire. James froze when he saw it. The locket had 2 tiny portraits inside our father on one side and a woman on the other, Vivian Cross. His face twisted, breaking between rage and disbelief. She kept this. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes, because she still forgave him James, even after everything. He staggered back, staring at the fire. For a moment I thought he might throw the whole box in, but instead he turned, shoulders slumped, and walked out into the storm without another word. Martha sank onto the couch, sobbing softly. "Helen, what happens now?" I stared at the blackened ashes in the fireplace, the letter gone, but the truth still burning. "We rebuild," I said quietly, but this time without lies. Outside, thunder cracked again, shaking the windows. I looked through the glass and caught a glimpse of James's truck idling at the end of the driveway, headlights still on. He wasn't leaving. He was waiting. That night the storm didn't let up. Wind howled through the trees like something alive, and every few minutes lightning split the sky wide open. I couldn't sleep. Every flash of light outside painted James's face across my walls, the fury, the disbelief, the way he'd looked at the fire before he left. But he hadn't really left. His truck stayed at the edge of the property for hours. I watched from the upstairs window, the curtains barely parted. He sat behind the wheel engine, off headlights, out of shadow, watching my mother's house like a predator stalking what was once his. At some point near dawn, the truck was gone. The only thing left behind was silence and the smell of wet earth. I made coffee and went back to the living room, the table still covered in scattered papers and ash. Martha had gone home the night before, too shaken to speak. She hadn't called since. I knelt by the hearth, sifting through the ashes of the burned letter. Most of it was gone, black flakes that crumbled to dust between my fingers. But something small glinted under the gray pile. A fragment. Half burned, the edge curled and brittle, but the ink still visible. It was the bottom of the second page, the part I never read aloud, the last few lines of Mother's handwriting. If this truth reaches Helen, there is one more thing she must know. The real reason I hid the first child was not out of shame. It was because of danger. The child was never supposed to be born. My heart froze. The first child, I turned the paper over, but the rest was gone. The flame had eaten it clean. I stumbled backward, breath quickening. My mind replayed the words over and over. The child was never supposed to be born. It didn't make sense. I was the oldest. There was no first child before me, not that I ever knew of. Unless... I ran upstairs to Mother's old wardrobe again. The scent of cedar hit me sharp and dry. Inside, her clothes still hung neatly untouched since the funeral. I searched the shelves, the drawers, the lining. Nothing. But then my hand brushed the back panel, loose wood, a small gap. I pressed, and it shifted slightly. Inside, wedged between the boards, was a thin, folded sheet of paper wrapped in cloth. My pulse thundered as I pulled it free. The writing was old, faint, but I recognized it immediately. My mother's handwriting. June 12, 1956. I can't forgive myself. The doctor said the baby didn't make it, but I know he lied. He was paid to make it disappear. If anyone finds this, know that my firstborn still lives. They took her from me before I could even hold her. The world tilted. They took her. Her. I sank to the floor, the letter shaking in my hands. All this time, I thought I was the oldest child. But I wasn't. I wasn't even her first. Somewhere out there, another daughter existed. Someone my mother had lost, maybe before she ever had a chance to know. I read the letter again, desperate for details, but the rest was gone. The ink faded, the bottom torn. Only one line remained at the end, barely legible. If I cannot find her, I've left a clue in the diary. It will lead her back to me. The diary. My eyes widened. The same diary I found days ago, the one I hadn't dared to open yet. The one hidden in the lowest drawer with that haunting inscription, "Find Samuel in Ohio." I stood there shivering despite the heat of the room. My hands clutched the letter like it might vanish if I blinked. The truth was bigger than James, bigger than inheritance. Mother hadn't just hidden her shame, she'd hidden a life. And if that diary held the rest of the story, then I had no choice. I needed to read it. But just as I turned to leave the room, the phone rang. The sound split through the silence, sharp and sudden. I jumped, nearly dropping the letter. I picked up the receiver, heart pounding. "Hello?" A man's voice, gravelly and low, came through the line. "Mrs. Parker, you don't know me, but your mother once did. My name is Samuel Cross." The name hit me like a bolt of lightning. Cross. Vivian Cross. "Who are you?" I whispered. A pause. Then quietly, "I think I'm the man your mother tried to keep hidden." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my hand shaking. Outside, thunder rolled again, deep, distant, and final. And for the first time, I realized the truth hadn't destroyed our family yet. It was just getting started. For a long time, I couldn't move. The phone still buzzed faintly in my hand, the echo of that voice, deep, calm, unsettlingly familiar, hanging in the air like smoke. Samuel Cross. The name kept spinning in my head. Vivian Cross, the woman who'd given birth to James, and now a Samuel Cross calling me out of nowhere. Coincidence didn't exist in my family anymore. I poured myself a glass of water, but barely drank. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Finally, I sat down at the kitchen table, took a deep breath, and dialed 69, the last call return. The line rang twice before a mechanical voice said, "This number is unavailable." Of course. I didn't know if I was being haunted or hunted, but I needed to know. I went to the drawer where I'd hidden the diary, the small leather-bound book I'd found in Mother's dresser. I'd been too afraid to open it before, afraid of what new truth might crawl out. Now fear wasn't enough to stop me. The cover was worn smooth, the spine cracked. Inside the first page carried a faint scent of lavender and something else, iron maybe. The ink had bled in places, but her handwriting was unmistakable. If you are reading this, my darling, it means the world has finally caught up to the truth I buried. The Cross family and the Parker family were never meant to be enemies or lovers, but fate decided otherwise. My breath caught. Samuel was your father's business partner, and Vivian was his wife. What began as trust turned to temptation. I was young, foolish, and lonely, and one night, I broke my vows. The result was a child I could never claim, not without destroying everything. My pulse thundered in my ears. She was talking about herself and Samuel Cross. Your father never knew the full truth. He believed the affair was his, that he was the one who strayed. That's why he brought home James. He thought he was repaying the sin I never confessed. The room swayed. If that was true, then James wasn't just Vivian's son. He was my half-brother. And the firstborn she mentioned in the secret letter, the one taken at birth, that child could only be hers and Samuel Cross's. The phone rang again. I froze. The same old rotary sound, shrill, insistent. I picked up slowly. "Hello?" That same voice. Calm, deep. "Mrs. Parker, I didn't mean to frighten you. Who are you, I told you. My name is Samuel Cross. I was your mother's friend, years ago." I tried to keep my voice steady. "You expect me to believe that after one phone call, I expect nothing he said. But your mother left me a message before she passed. She said if a woman named Helen ever called, or if I ever heard her name again, I should tell her the truth." I gripped the receiver tighter. What truth? A pause. "Then the child she lost didn't die. She was taken to protect her from someone powerful. Your father made enemies. Mrs. Parker, dangerous ones." My heart pounded. "You're saying my sister is alive?" "Yes," he said quietly, "and she's been looking for you." The line crackled. My stomach twisted. "Where is she?" He hesitated. "Ohio, the small town of Briar Ridge. There's an old farm under my name. Come alone. You'll find the answers there." Why me? Why now? Because the man who buried the truth is gone. And his son. Your brother won't stop until he buries you too. Before I could speak again, the line went dead. I stood there frozen, the sound of the dial tone slicing through the silence. Outside, the wind howled again, shaking the windows. I looked down at the diary still open on the table. The last line written on that same page made my blood run cold. If you ever find Samuel, be careful. Not every truth deserves light. I closed the diary slowly, my reflection staring back from the dark window. James knew I was uncovering everything, and if what Samuel said was true, if there really was another daughter, then finding her wasn't just about answers anymore. It was about finishing what my mother couldn't. I packed the diary, the letters, and the burned page into a leather bag. The storm outside had calmed, but the world inside me was chaos. Before leaving, I paused by the photo of Mother on the wall, her eyes calm, wise, almost expectant. "Whatever you did," I whispered, "I'll find her. I'll finish it." As I locked the door behind me, a car engine roared to life somewhere down the street. Headlights flickered in the distance. Someone was waiting or following. And for the first time, I wondered if my mother had ever escaped the danger she'd written about. Or if after all these years it had finally found me. I left before sunrise. The road out of Maple Hollow was slick with mist, the fog curling low across the fields like smoke from an invisible fire. The silence inside the car was thick, broken only by the hum of the tires on the wet asphalt. Every mile I drove felt like I was peeling away another layer of my old life. The teacher, the daughter, the obedient sister. By the time I crossed into Ohio, the sky had turned pale gray, and my nerves had settled into a strange kind of calm, the numbness that comes after too much fear. The GPS kept flickering, the signal fading in and out, but I didn't need it. Samuel Cross's directions had been simple Briar Ridge, end of Old Creek Road. You'll see the red barn. It sounded like the beginning of every bad dream. As I passed the wooden sign that read, "Welcome to Briar Ridge," Estin or 1891, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been here before. The rolling hills, the rows of dying corn, the single church steeple rising above the fog, it all felt painfully familiar. When I reached Old Creek Road, the asphalt turned to gravel. Dust kicked up behind me. Ahead through the mist, I saw a red barn leaning slightly to one side next to a weathered farmhouse. And on the porch, waiting, was a man. He was tall, gray-haired, his posture straight despite the years. When I stepped out of the car, the wind carried the smell of hay rust and something faintly sweet honeysuckle, maybe. "Mrs. Parker," he called, voice exactly as it had sounded over the phone, steady, deep, unshaken. "Mr. Cross," I said, keeping my distance. "You said you knew my mother." He nodded. "Margaret and I met in 1955. I worked with your father. We were friends. Until everything fell apart." His eyes were sharp but tired, like someone who'd lived too long with ghosts. "She left me a letter, too," he said, reaching into his coat. He pulled out an envelope so worn the edges had turned almost transparent. "She told me to wait until you came." He handed it to me. My fingers shook as I opened it. The letter was short, less than a page. "Samuel, if Helen ever finds you, tell her the truth. Tell her I forgive her father, but not his silence. And tell her that the first child we lost, our daughter, is alive. She was adopted under the name Clara Whitmore. She may not know who she is, but she will come looking when the time is right." My heart stopped. Clara Whitmore. I'd heard that name before. Weeks ago, I'd read about a missing woman in the local paper, a real estate agent found dead under mysterious circumstances. Same name. I looked up at Samuel, the words catching in my throat. "She's dead." He stared at me, his face paling. No, that's not possible. She was in the news, 2 towns over. A woman named Clara Whitmore, 43, adopted no known family. Killed in what they said was a robbery. He stumbled back, one hand clutching the railing. "Then it's happening again," he muttered. "They found her. Who I demanded. Who found her?" He looked at me, then really looked, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. The same men who forced your mother to give her up. The same men who threatened to destroy your father's business if he didn't comply. The wind picked up, whipping dust around us. "Mrs. Parker," he said, voice trembling now. "They think you know where the rest of the documents are, the ones that prove what your father did with them. If they killed Clara, they won't stop until they find you." I froze. "Documents? What documents?" He opened his mouth to answer, and then the sound of an engine cut through the air. We both turned. A black truck was coming down the gravel road, fast headlights glaring through the mist. I knew that sound. I'd know it anywhere. "Get inside," Samuel shouted, but I didn't move. I just stared as the truck screeched to a stop 20 feet away. The driver's door swung open. James. His face was hard, his eyes burning with something between rage and madness. "Hello, sister," he said softly. "You just can't stop digging, can you?" James stepped out of the truck, rain dripping from his coat, his boots crushing the gravel with each deliberate step. The headlights cut through the fog, painting him in harsh white light. Behind me, Samuel stood frozen on the porch, one hand hovering near the door as if debating whether to run or fight. "I told you to stop," James said. His voice was calm, almost tender, and that scared me more than if he'd shouted. "But you never could listen, could you, Helen?" I steadied my voice. "You killed her." He stopped mid-step. "Who, Clara Whitmore, our sister? You knew who she was, didn't you?" He smiled, a small broken thing. "So you found her too." Samuel lunged forward. "You murdered your own blood, you bastard." James moved faster than I expected. He grabbed Samuel by the collar and slammed him against the porch railing. "You don't talk about my family," he shouted. "Stop it," I cried, rushing toward them. "James, please." He turned on me, breathing hard, his eyes wild. "Don't you get it, Helen? She wasn't supposed to exist. None of this was. Mother lied. Father lied, and now you're doing the same, pretending you're some kind of saint while you dig up graves that should have stayed closed." Lightning flashed behind him, splitting the sky open. I could see the gun, then tucked under his coat. My heart stopped. "James," I said softly, raising my hands, "you don't have to do this. Don't tell me what I have to do," he hissed. "I lost everything because of you. The company froze my accounts. Martha won't talk to me, the bank's investigating the will. You did that to yourself," I snapped. "You built your life on lies, and now you're choking on them." He flinched, just slightly, then pulled out the gun. "Then maybe it's time to end the story." Samuel took a step forward, hands raised. "James, listen to me. You don't want the gun fired." The sound tore through the rain and echoed across the empty field. Samuel staggered, clutching his shoulder, and fell to the ground. "Samuel," I screamed, dropping to my knees beside him. Blood stained his sleeve, dark and spreading fast. James took a trembling step back, eyes wide. I didn't mean..." But before he could finish, Samuel's good hand reached into his coat and pulled out a small flash drive on a chain. He pressed it into my palm. "Run!" he rasped. "Don't let him get it." James lunged. I shoved Samuel aside and ran toward the barn, the flash drive burning cold against my skin. I could hear James's boots pounding behind me, the metallic click of the gun as he reloaded. Inside the barn was dark, smelling of dust and oil. I ducked behind a wooden beam, gasping for air. The gun clicked again. "You can't hide forever," James shouted. "You never could. I spotted an old lantern hanging near the hay bales, the kind my father used to keep." I grabbed it, my hand trembling. Then, as his shadow moved closer, I threw it across the floor. Glass shattered. Flames roared to life. "Damn it," James yelled, stumbling back as fire raced up the walls. I ran toward the back door, the heat licking my face. When I looked back, he was standing in the center of the burning barn, the gun still in his hand, eyes locked on me. "Tell Mother," he said, voice breaking. "I finally understand." Then the roof gave way. The flames swallowed him whole. Outside, rain poured harder, steam rising from the blaze, as if the world itself wanted to erase everything that happened. I collapsed in the mud beside Samuel, who was still breathing barely. His eyes fluttered open. "It's over," I whispered. He shook his head weakly. "No, not yet." "What's on that drive? We'll finish what she started." I looked down at the tiny flash drive, its silver glint catching the firelight. Somewhere deep inside, I felt the weight of generations pressing on my shoulders. Betrayal, guilt, forgiveness, all tangled together. "I'll make it right," I said quietly. "I promise." As dawn broke through the smoke, I realized the storm had finally stopped. But the truth, like the fire behind me, was still burning. By the time the fire died down, the sky had turned gray and soft again, the kind of gray that looks like regret. The barn was nothing but twisted beams and smoke, the air thick with the smell of rain ash and something metallic. James was gone. The fire had taken him, the brother I'd loved, hated, pitied, and finally understood too late. I sat in the mud beside Samuel until the paramedics arrived. His breathing was shallow, his face pale, but he was alive. They loaded him into the ambulance, and as they drove off, one of the firemen crouched beside me. "Ma'am, you should get checked out," he said gently. I nodded, but I didn't move. My hands were shaking, my clothes soaked, but all I could see was the flash drive glinting in my palm, the last piece of my mother's story. Later at the hospital, I sat by Samuel's bedside while he slept under morphine and bandages. The television in the corner buzzed softly, showing the morning news. A reporter's voice broke through the static. Authorities are investigating a tragic fire at a Briar Ridge property belonging to Samuel Cross. One man was found deceased, believed to be James Parker of Maple Hollow, Vermont. I turned off the TV before she could finish. The world would write its version of the story, arson accident, insanity, but none of it would be true. I opened my purse and stared at the flash drive again. It was small, harmless looking. I didn't even know what was on it. Only that Samuel had told me it will finish what she started. I borrowed a nurse's laptop and plugged it in. A single folder appeared titled 1956. Inside were scans of old documents, faded contracts, and letters. My father's signature appeared again and again beside the name Cross Industries. The files revealed a deal between him and Samuel's company, secret government research funding payments, hidden patents. But one document made my blood run cold. It was a signed statement from my father under pressure from the department the child was relocated to protect ongoing experiments. No record of the birth should remain. Experiments. Relocated. Mother hadn't just lost her first child, she'd been forced to give her up. I covered my mouth, tears burning my eyes. Everything she'd done, the lies, the letters, the silence, it was all to keep us safe from people powerful enough to erase a life. I copied the files to a new drive and tucked it into my jacket pocket. When Samuel finally woke, his voice was faint, but certain. "You found it, didn't you?" "Yes," I whispered. "And now they'll know the truth." He smiled weakly. "Be careful, Helen. The truth doesn't set everyone free. Sometimes it just changes the prison." Outside the window, the first light of morning broke through the clouds, casting gold across the horizon. For the first time in weeks, I breathed without fear. But as the monitor beside Samuel beeped steadily, I couldn't help but feel the story wasn't over. Because the truth, once released, never really dies. 3 days after the fire, I returned to Maple Hollow. The house smelled different now, less like grief, more like distance. The photographs on the wall looked like strangers. Every corner of the house whispered with ghosts that finally had names. I made tea, sat by the window, and opened Mother's diary one last time. The leather was cracked, the pages nearly falling apart. A piece of folded paper slipped out from between the last pages, one I hadn't seen before. It was brittle, sealed with red wax that had faded to brown. I broke it open. "My dearest Helen, if you are reading this, it means I have failed to protect the family the way I hoped. The world you live in now is built on what your father and I buried long ago, a lie meant to keep you safe. I have lived with guilt for too many years, but know this. You were never the quiet one, never the weak one. You were the light I trusted to reveal what I could not." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. The men who forced your father's hand are long gone, but their legacy remains. If the truth finds its way back to you, promise me you will use it to heal, not destroy. Justice is only real when it carries mercy. I closed the diary, pressing it to my chest. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, only exhaustion, the kind that comes after surviving a storm that's lasted your whole life. Outside, the sky was pink with the last light of evening. A car slowed in front of the house, a black sedan windows tinted. My stomach tensed, but it didn't stop. It just rolled past. Maybe paranoia, maybe instinct. Either way, I double-locked the door. Later, I took the flash drive from my jacket pocket. Samuel's words echoed in my mind. Sometimes, the truth just changes the prison. I opened my laptop. The files stared back at me, names, numbers, official stamps. Proof of everything my family had done and everything done to us. I hovered over the upload button, ready to send it all to the news outlets, to lawyers, to whoever would listen. But then Mother's final words came back. Use it to heal, not destroy. I closed the laptop. Maybe some truths didn't need to be shouted from rooftops. Maybe they just needed to stop being buried. I took the diary, the letters, and the drive and placed them together in the cedar box, the same one Mother left me at the beginning. I locked it, wrapped it in cloth, and slid it back into the wardrobe where it had waited all these years. The house was quiet again, only the sound of the wind through the trees outside, soft, almost like a sigh. I poured the last of my tea, sat down, and looked at Mother's photograph on the mantel. "You can rest now," I whispered. "I know everything." For a moment, I could almost feel her presence, warm, forgiving, proud. Then a knock came at the door, a single, slow knock. I turned toward it, my breath catching. Outside, the wind carried a man's voice, faint but clear through the crack in the frame. "Mrs. Parker, I believe you have something that belongs to the government." The teacup slipped from my hand and shattered. The storm, it seemed, had never really ended. For a moment, I didn't move. The air inside the house turned to glass, cold, thin, ready to shatter. The man's voice outside was calm, almost polite, but there was something beneath it, authority, the kind that doesn't ask twice. "Mrs. Parker?" He called again, more firmly this time. "Please open the door. We need to talk." My heart thudded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I looked toward the wardrobe, the cedar box still hidden inside, the flash drive, the letters, the diary. All of it was there. Everything they'd been trying to erase. I moved quietly to the back of the house. The floorboards creaked under my bare feet. Through the kitchen window, I saw two men in dark suits standing on the porch. A black SUV idled on the road, engine running. Government, or something pretending to be. I grabbed my coat and slipped out through the side door, stepping into the night air. The sky was a bruise of blue and gray stars veiled by clouds. I crept along the fence line past the lilac bushes until I reached the small path that led toward the woods behind the property. When I looked back, one of the men was knocking again. The other spoke into an earpiece. They weren't leaving. I pressed on my shoes, sinking into the damp earth. My mind raced. What would Mother do? What did she want me to do? Then I remembered Samuel's words. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it just changes the prison. The truth was now my burden to carry, not to release. I couldn't let them take it, not after everything she'd sacrificed. I walked until I reached the clearing by the old willow tree, the one where Father used to read to me as a child. The pond nearby reflected the moon like cracked glass. I knelt in the dirt, digging with my hands until I hit the cold roots beneath. Then I buried the cedar box. Every letter, every photograph, every file, gone beneath the soil. When it was done, I whispered into the night, "Rest now, Mother. They won't take you again." The wind shifted a soft breath against my cheek, and for a second I swore I heard her voice. "You did what I couldn't." I stood and turned back toward the house. The men were still there, lights sweeping the yard. One shouted, "Mrs. Parker, you can't hide forever." I smiled faintly to myself. You'd be surprised, I thought. Then I walked toward them, slowly, calmly, empty-handed. When they saw me, one of them stepped forward. "Ma'am, we just need to retrieve a government property, classified information. You're not in trouble." I met his eyes and said evenly, "There's nothing left to find." They searched the house anyway, tearing through drawers, pulling up floorboards, rifling through closets. They found nothing because the truth, for once, was safe. By the time they left, dawn was breaking over Maple Hollow. I stood in the doorway, watching the light spill across the wet grass, smoke from the fire still faint on the wind. The world felt quieter, like it had exhaled. Later that morning, I packed a small bag, just clothes, photographs, and my mother's rosary. I left the house unlocked, let them take whatever was left. As I drove away, I caught one last glimpse of the property in the rearview mirror, the willow tree swaying gently, guarding the ground where the box lay buried. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe back to Briar Ridge to check on Samuel. Maybe somewhere new where no one knew the Parker name. But I knew this much: the story of my family was over. The secrets were no longer mine to keep. And as the morning sun broke fully over the horizon, I whispered to myself, not in grief, but in peace. Some truths belong to the earth, and that's where they'll stay.